My name is John LeBeau. I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Agricultural Resources, and I want to thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today to talk about the draft pollinator protection plan. A couple of business items, as you've heard me say on multiple occasions, we would like everyone who's here to sign in. We had no idea about how many folks were going to come today, so we have set up two sign-in sheets because we wanted to be sure to afford the opportunity to the folks that the department invited to attend, that they would have the opportunity to speak, and if there was additional time, anyone else in attendance could speak. Judging by the crowd we have and the amount of time we have, I think just about anybody who wants to speak, I shouldn't say just about, anybody who wants to speak should have opportunity to speak. Something about the building here that I learned about in a rather unfortunate way is the way this building was engineered and designed. Any conversations that go on out in the public area carry up into the offices to the point that you can be speaking very quietly and they will hear every word you say. They're not particularly interested in that, but they do find that distracting. So fish and wildlife folk will approach you if you're engaged in lengthy conversations in the public areas, or if you're making cell phone calls in the public areas. So please keep that in mind. We appreciate them hosting us today. They left us some leftover coffee and goodies from a previous meeting that we're all welcome to should you like to have some refreshments. With me today, here up at the table, just for purposes of your convenience, is our Chief Apiary Inspector, Kim Skirm, our Chief Pesticide Inspector, Taryn Muscola, and our Environmental Chemist, Hatsavanya. Before we get to the main purpose of the meeting, which is to hear what any initial reaction some of you folks may have from the plan, the draft plan, I'm going to ask him to make a brief introduction of how we got to where we are today.
Okay. Well, thank you all so much for coming. I feel like I've just seen everyone like a day or so ago. So
You did.
This is the most beekeepers in such a short amount of time. It's fantastic. So just wanted to go over the plan. So we were obviously had two drafts of plans that were submitted to us. One from the working group from the Farm Bureau, and then one from the 8-county beekeeping group. And so we took those documents, and it was kind of an interesting process because I literally took every document and laid it out on the table and went line by line. And what we did is initial draft was combining those two documents into one draft. And then once we had that working draft, I went from there and took all the state plans that were available to sort of create the most uniform, comprehensive document that we could align with other states that have adopted pollinator plans. And with that, the next step was to compare that with what the national guidelines were for making these plans. So the EPA, and I'll make sure I get their name right, the State FIFRA Issue Research and Evaluation Group, or SIGFRIG, also had like a description of instructions for what should be in these plans. And so once we had that level of editing, we now were at the point where we circulated it within the department. And so within our department, we had people from the pesticide group that worked on it, people from the invasive pest and weed management group that worked on it, and also our toxicologists in the department, our environmental chemists, work on it as well, so we could sort of get all these different backgrounds and experiences into the plan. And this is sort of what you're looking at today. So it's definitely a combined effort. It is a guidance document, so I just want to reiterate that again. It is a best management practice document, so the goal of it is not to be legislation or any sort of law. It is basically just that. It's a set of best management practices for the groups of stakeholders that are listed and for the managed pollinators that are listed. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. As far as testimony, we're here to hear what you have to say today. This is not the only opportunity to make comments. The department will take written comments in emails to Kim at kim.skyrm@state.mass.us. And I think we requested that in the subject line we use pollinator plan comments.
Yeah.
And we'd very much appreciate if you do that. That would help us do a little bit of sorting without effort. Question?
Yeah, my comment pertains to that. A lot of us here were surprised by the email list that came out to people invited to this meeting. For example, I'm from Middlesex County. We filed a comment. We weren't invited. And I wouldn't have known about this except that a friend told me. I think there ought to be another meeting where the beekeepers are invited at large. People didn't even know whether this was an open meeting or not.
That's correct, and it was a meeting done by invitation. However, I understand, as often happens, that friends tell friends, and we're entirely fine with that. And what I was about to say was that, yes, we do plan to have some publicly announced open public comment periods, open comment sessions. We'd like to have several in several different parts of the state. So that is among the plans that we have in mind, to have that during the month of March. Could be done as quickly as possible. So actually, I regret that I was hoping I was going to be able to tell you today the dates and the times. I am not. But we were working on it in the office as I left this morning, and we have to coordinate first with Kim's schedule and then find available hosts. But we hope to get that information out very shortly, and that will be open to the public. So,
Is that, I understand that's a listening session type format?
yes, as will be today. So we're going to hear comments, take testimony on the draft plan that we will then take back to the department and review and consider. We'd like to do all this public comment during the month of March. We'd like to do our work developing a final draft in the month of April, and to try to have a final product ready for May. That's the goal, that's the plan that we've been working on for many months now. So I'd like, as I mentioned, this was scheduled to invite, as Kim mentioned, the folks that directly worked and submitted plans to us, either a framework or a plan, and I think it's only appropriate that those folks have the first opportunity to speak. I see we have about 25 people who have signed in. I know a few of you have mentioned you might not choose to speak, but just going by time, I'd ask you to limit your comments to 3-4 minutes tops, in fairness to everyone else in the room, so everyone has an opportunity to speak. And with that, if I can read your names, and forgive me when I butcher any pronunciation of any, I'm going to go through the list first of the folks, as we said, were originally invited to meet with us today. Richard Berman. And for the record, could you identify yourself, your affiliation, and your residence, your city and town of residence?
I live in Holland, Massachusetts, and as you know, I'm the commercial applicator to the pesticide board, but I'm not here in that capacity. I'm here with several commercial colleagues. Just a couple of comments on the plan. One of the things that's important to the commercial industries is that we know where the beehives are, so we can take steps to avoid them and protect them. So I know that's probably a sensitive issue, but it's important so that we can take measures to avoid encountering those resources. Another comment, when I was in school at UMass at Amherst, there was a bee program there, and I took apiculture, and there was an apiary building there, and I would urge that we re-engage with cooperative extension of the university. I don't know what happened to that building. I know where it is in relation to Fernald Hall, but it would be wonderful to reinstate that and get that program going again. And one last thing, our industry has developed best management practices, and I'll give you our version of the best management practices. And so we're taking steps and trying to do what we can to protect the natural resource. That's all.
Thank you very much. Ed Szymanski.
Good afternoon, I'm Ed Szymanski. I'm the president of Norfolk County Beekeepers Association, which was one of the clubs that submitted the 8-county framework. One of the things, I sent a note out to our club and an email out asking people to read the draft. And several people came back to me with a comment, which is one that I have too, is that although the applicators, it was written that the pesticide applicators should know where the location of the hives are. And I think in concert with that, the beekeepers would like to know where the pesticides are being used. And people are asking for a central registry that's accessible by the beekeepers of who's using the pesticides, what materials are being used, and when, possibly even what crops, so that beekeepers could look. Because even if you had a registry of where the beehives are actually located, many of us actually, look to place hives on other properties, farms and other properties that we know of, and it would be nice to be able to take a look and see where things are being used, because that might affect our decisions on where we would locate hives. So like I said, I had a number of comments from that, a number of people I talked to, and I know one of them was submitted to you directly about that issue as well. Personally, I think that this draft is deficient in its not mentioning neonicotinoid pesticides specifically, because beekeepers feel that use should be limited, and it really hasn't been mentioned. And a general comment that I would make about the whole thing is that a lot of there aren't really any requirements, things that when you read the role of the applicators or the role of the farmers, that everything's sort of optional, and I think that there should be some stronger language written as far as, there's a paragraph that says, where possible, the materials and chemicals should be used at times when bees aren't foraging, like at night or whatever else. But you give them the option that way. People will say, well, it's not possible, especially like with corn. So if a corn farmer feels that it's necessary to apply a material, even one that's toxic to bees, that has to be done while the corn is flowering, they'll just say it's not possible. And it is. I mean, it is possible to grow these crops without the use of these materials, because people do it. That's all I buy for vegetables and so on. So it is possible. It might be a little bit difficult. It makes some people's lives difficult. But I think the wording has to be stronger to really help us, because the farmers need the bees too. But if they're just making a split decision based on that, and there's no real requirement, and so I think that some of the should and so on should be replaced with shall, and have this looked at a little bit more carefully. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mary Doan?
Wayne, I'm gonna, no oral comment at this point, I'm gonna submit a written one.
Thank you. Karen Conley?
Good afternoon, Finance Karen Conley. I'm the Executive Director for the Massachusetts Association of Lawn Care Professionals and for the Green Industry Alliance, which is a group of landscapers, arborists, irrigation people, us, and the golf course superintendents of New England. We will also be submitting written testimony. I did want to point out a couple of different things. Our people are licensed applicators, and so they receive training. They are also, many of them are beekeepers. I've done some projects and some other testimony with a golf course superintendent who does use neonics occasionally on his course. He also has beehives, which are considered to be extremely healthy, and in fact, he's going to be putting in 4 more hives this year. And he is very avid on what he does. He's planted acres of flowers and foliage, foraging material for the bees so that he can keep them healthy. That's one thing that our associations are trying to encourage our members to do, is to plant more foraging material to encourage their customers to do this as much as possible, or wherever they might be making decisions on larger areas to put in pollinator-friendly gardens. because it seems when I was at all of the MDAR meetings, all of the Farm Bureau meetings, and one of the things that I learned from one of the beekeepers was that in his particular area, because of a GPS study, there's really no nutrients, not enough nutrients for the number of bees that were there. And so I took that back to our people, and they're all committed to doing that. And I know the other associations are also committed to doing that, because it's something that we can all participate in. I was listening yesterday very briefly to a report about the monarch butterflies. And we all know because of their lack of foraging material what's happened to them. Well, there's been a market increase this year, and this was from one of the, I don't remember who it was, but there's been a market increase, and she was saying that there's still a long way to go, but because now people are aware, they're beginning to plant more foraging material. And so, in the milkweed, excuse me. But also you can see around here, because as people become aware, a lot of people aren't mowing down their fields as early. So I think the educational process is very important for all of us. Thank you.
Sean Greeno?
I'm Sean Greenhow. I'm a pesticide applicator and a member of the Pest Management Association and the Lawn Care Association and the Tree Association. Our main, I support what Richard had to say, but our main issue is trying to understand where hives are located and understanding that the hive registry. Thank you.
Lucy Tabbitt.
I will be submitting written testimony, but I'm a little confused about why there is such a great deal amount of protecting pesticide applicators. I think we can go back and simply say that when a pesticide is applied, bees should not be flying. And I think that's been the basic rule of thumb in years gone by. So I asked the committee in front of me, why is that not being taken into consideration? And also, why haven't more beekeepers been included in the drafting of this plan? You have a great resource available just for the asking, and you have not come to us, but instead have put something before us that lacks a lot of directive, a lot of protection for pollinators in general. You don't address pollinators, you address just honeybees and managed beehives. So if it's a pollinator protection plan you're trying to enact, what happened to all the other pollinators? Are we discounting them as well? That's a question I'd like to have answered. The state should not be punitive to the beekeepers. We're here as your assets. With this plan, it looks like you're trying to discourage beekeepers by imposing fines, allowing pesticides to be loosely regulated, and provide more oppressive state and local regulations on beekeepers. You should create responsibility to help beekeepers and pollinators in general. And we're speaking for pollinators in general, not just honeybees that we manage. I would like to know why non-beekeepers keep telling beekeepers how to keep bees. And I was hoping I'd get that answer today.
It's a listening session. I'm not prepared to give a response. Thank you. Dave Lawson?
Hi, that's fine.
Cliff Hughes?
I'm good, thank you.
Glenn Carr?
I wasn't gonna make a comment before, but I wanted to agree with this gentleman here. I'm sorry, I forgot your name, but I think it's a good idea that if people think that beekeepers should register where their hives are, and where it's more than reasonable to accept or to expect that commercial applicators should fill out the same sort of information as to where they're applying their pesticides.
Ed Davidian.
Ed Davidian, President of Massachusetts Farm Bureau, and also a fruit and vegetable grower right here in Worcester County in Northborough, Massachusetts. You know, there's a huge disconnect, I believe, in what a farmer out there in the field has to do in order to grow a crop, and what the beekeepers expect we can do. Okay? We do use neonics for a reason. Neonics are safer for us to use. You know, for myself. They're safer for the general public when we sell the product. Now what you're worried about is the problems with bees that you think is a problem with neonics. That hasn't even been proven. In Australia, okay, they don't have a problem with colony decline, okay, and they use far more neonics than we do. So the problem is not just neonics. The problem is entire bee health. We all know that. But you're trying to find a fast fix in the use of neonics. You know, and I go back to this gentleman's statement here, which as a grower really bothered me, to list where I am going to be using a pesticide. Do you have any implications, do you have any idea what the general public is going to do? They're going to go on the website, find out every little chemical I use, and they're going to go on the websites and everything else, and they're going to say, my farm is poisonous. Okay? You can't do that. We have been raising crops in this state since the state's been here. We take care of the bees. I have quite a few neighbors that have bees in our area, and I use neonics. And the next farm for me use neonicotinoids, okay? And we're not having the problem, okay? So if you people are having a problem, look within your own practices for that problem, okay? And as far as spraying corn that you mentioned, corn is one of those things that we have to spray. And we have to spray when the timing is perfect, okay? You don't make your living growing corn, I do. I can't afford a mistake, all right? I have to pay my bills. So we have certain things that we have to do on a commercial farm that is extremely important. You want me to change my pesticides to something that is even more harsher to bees? Because that's the alternative. We left those chemicals behind because they were so harsh. And we switched to one that's safer. Believe me, when I used to use landing in the cornfield, okay, because that's the alternative. That's one of the alternatives is landing. I could drop more bees than you could produce in a given afternoon. So I mean, be careful what you ask for, okay? You gotta understand that neonics is a safe chemical. We need to be aware that bees are around. Yes, we know that, we get that in our industry. We depend on them, okay? We don't take for granted a bee population at all. So we spray certain times of the day. We spray when bees are out less. But you know, to pass or to ask for things to be done that prohibit us from using something that is safer for me to use, when there's no proof that I'm hurting any of the bee population around, I ask you why, okay? Now, I think I probably said enough, and we will be sending from Farm Bureau some written comment. Because we are very much concerned about this, concerned about it for our people, okay, in the agricultural industry. And the other thing you have to understand is, there's talks of making it a restricted pesticide, special license, this, that, and all the other stuff that go along with that. We have a lot of people in the agricultural industry that do not have licenses, that run with the lesser harsh chemicals, okay? You're gonna force a problem on them, because now they're gonna have to get registered, and they're gonna have to pass a test, and then maybe they're gonna be using a more bee toxic chemical. So, think of what you're asking for. That's all I have to say.
George O'Neill.
I'm gonna submit written comment.
Thank you.
I do have one question for Mr. Davidian, if I may ask him. Farm Bureau does represent beekeepers as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, that concludes the list of the folks that the department invited to meet. I know there might have been a few latecomers while this session was in progress, so for their benefit, we were asking those folks who received the email from Kim asking to attend today, to offer them priority or first opportunity to speak. So if there's anyone in the room who was on that list, who we didn't get you to sign in, I think a gentleman back there, could you identify yourself, please, sir?
My name is John Porter. I'm Director of Research and Development for the Indian Makepeace Company, a large cranberry grower in Wareham, Massachusetts, and we care very deeply about the health of our bees. Every year we bring in a number of hives. We've been using the same beekeepers for several decades in some cases, and we're trying to do all we can to make sure that our bogs are as safe as possible for their bees. We're making sure that our foremen are applying the pesticides only when needed. At the times they're actually needed, we've got them out scouting all the time to make sure that the pesticides are actually needed, and we rarely use neonicotinoids in the cranberry industry, but in cases where we do, it's a control of pests that we really don't have any other option to control. As far as trying to take care of the health of our bees, we are in the process of putting in a number of acres of native of wildflower meadows throughout our property. Cranberries, we just can't get cranberries without bee participation. So if our bees aren't healthy, we cannot get good yields. So as a grower, we are very respectful of our bees and want to make sure that we've got as healthy bees as possible.
Thank you.
Will we have opportunity to speak again?
Well, as I said, there are going to be other public comment periods, yes.
I mean today.
Well, we'll see, we'll go through and we'll see. Okay, so now we're going to move to the other list. And again, I think some of you folks may have told me that you didn't want to speak, but I didn't note that, so forgive me. Marcy Taylor. Renee Barton.
No comment.
Wayne Andrews.
Yeah, if you're gonna ask for a comment, so I'll add a little here and there. I know I've stated to most of you there's an importance for oxalic acid in the state, and you're cooperating. And just to re-stress that in terms of safety and training, and I know it's right around the corner, but still it's a very necessary and important part of the beekeeping industry across the entire United States, not just here, and just wanted to reiterate that. Thank you.
Phil Gaudette.
No comment.
Dick Callahan.
I'll be submitting some comments in writing. I've got a background in beekeeping for about 12 years. I'm a director of the Worcester County Beekeeping Association, and I've got a PhD in toxicology and pesticide chemistry. I'd just actually like to, off my written comments here, just address the comments that Mr. Davidian made, in the sense that first of all, subacute toxicology really has almost nothing to do with acute toxicity of a lot of chemicals. So what most beekeepers are really worried about is what the long-term low-level effects of these chemicals are on bees, not the acute bee kills that you can get, certainly if they get directly sprayed by chemicals. A review of the literature on neonics came out about 6 months ago from Germany, and it cited 1,200 peer-reviewed articles, all of which say that neonics have got subacute long-term effects on not just honeybees, but all pollinators, but frankly all insects. The insect population in the world is way down, and with it is way down all the insect predators, all the insectivorous birds. Every one of those species is down. So the use of these materials is really only argued against by people who make their livings dependent on the use of these materials. That's the only papers you're going to find that claim that there's no use. And you can find similar papers from the cigarette industry saying cigarettes are good for you. I mean, it's just, that's the way these kind of things go. So, in the pharmaceutical industry, if I want to get an antibiotic, I have to get a doctor's prescription, and then I have to buy it from a pharmacist. I can't buy it directly from the manufacturer. If I want to buy an antibiotic that I'm going to spray by the ton on my property that goes into the groundwater that comes into your property, I just simply go buy a truckload and say I'm following the directions. So the whole system is really pretty biased and out of control. And I do think it's kind of, and I'm not against the use of pesticides. I think the agricultural industry has to use them under current processes to feed the world. I really believe in that. But it's got to be done with some kind of controls. And in our framework that was submitted to MDAR, and I have to say, from what I can tell, just totally ignored, we had what I think were reasonable controls and some type of control on the use of these materials. And I would have to say I totally agree with the fact that not only should beekeepers, but I think the general public should know what's being used. If I want to use an antibiotic on myself, I have to get a prescription from a physician, and then I have to buy it from someone who doesn't manufacture it. If the general public is being exposed to these materials, and the people that raise the crops tell you they don't want anybody to know what they're using, I mean, this just doesn't make any sense. Thank you.
David LaGraze.
I would like to point out that in between knowing what a nicotinoid it does and being an applicator and a beekeeper are similar things, and that we're all going to find common ground on this, whether we like it or not. So it happens to be that we're the group in the room. So it's maybe a smarter way to do this would be to look at personal histories of the bees, of the applications, trade resources amongst ourselves and not make it an asset war and do things that you know, big people do instead of carrying on in a fast-paced disaster that's looking like, to me, being not capable of sustaining anyone in the room. That's all.
Mark Hanson.
Mark Hanson, I live in the town of Concord. And we have a couple of concerns in the town of Concord. Last winter, we lost 80% of our beehives. We suspect neonicotinoids are involved. The type of losses we've experienced, the type of losses that were reported last week at the Middlesex County Beekeepers Association led me to believe that a lot of those losses are neonic related. In other words, a lot of colonies with not many bees left in them. Bees have a complex nervous system that requires skills in navigation that a lot of us couldn't do in our own heads. A bee in a hive can receive vectors to two different sources of honey, one here and one there. Leaves a hive for the first one. This experiment was done in Germany. On the way to the first one, the pollen, the source of material is withdrawn. The bee arrives at the first location, flies around, and what do you suppose it does next? Goes directly to the second one. Could any of us do that? If I told you, go 1.5 miles east of here, there's great clover. And oh yeah, and over there, northwest of us, about 1.25 miles, is some really good alfalfa. Could you go directly from the, I couldn't. We won't go there. So, two things. One is, in reviewing this draft, it's very deficient. You ask us to register our hives. I would be glad to register where my hives are. I want everybody who applies stuff to know where my hives are, because I don't want you applying them there. And now one question I got for the applicators is, if you know my hive's a 1/2 mile away, are you gonna stop your application? Because bees forage 2 miles. Would it be if it was 1.5 miles away, you're gonna stop your application? In the town of Concord, there's only a 1/2 mile square, 1/2 mile circle in the middle of town where it's more than 2 miles from any one of the borders of the town. So that's one F. I think you need to register how much is being applied, what is being applied, the active ingredients or the product name, the quantity, the location, the date, and the crop. I think that's reasonable because if I want to put my hive down someplace, I want to put it far away from where that's going to be applied. If there is a plan that's not actually being applied yet, if there's a plan to apply during the next year, I'd like to know that ahead of time. We tentatively plan to apply, or we tentatively plan to plant corn with 1.25 micrograms of neonicotinoids on a kernel, because that's a typical application. That's part of it. I'll be submitting some written comments. One last comment. That idea of telling beekeepers where you're applying stuff or what's going on with this. We had a meeting in Concord last week with our agriculture committee. A farmer after the meeting came to me and said, what you guys need to do is we need to tell everybody in town, we need to record how much we're applying. This is a farmer who uses pesticides. He says, in order to get a handle on this, we gotta know what's going on. We gotta know what's going on. We have farms in Concord. We have golf courses in Concord. We have professional landscapers in Concord. And so our plan, we hope to implement this year, is to start that registration process, and I hope that the state picks that up too. That's my comment. I should say, by the way, I've kept bees since 1968, 46 years, and I stopped 2 years ago because they were dying from neonics.
Edward Carl, please.
Thank you very much. I'll submit in writing. I look forward to your future meetings. I think these are great.
Ann Dunham.
Thank you. I'll submit it.
Roger Case, Cass.
No comments.
Okay. Randy Johnson.
Randy Johnson, representing Essex County Beekeepers Association, Blacksburg Agricultural Commission. I have been a beekeeper for over 50 years, and I've been a farmer longer than that. And the farming operation, the beekeeping operation are simultaneous and fairly close together, and we've had up until varroa and pesticides, basically, that we're using now. Beekeeping years ago was easy. Beekeeping today is, you need a lot of science behind it. But a couple of points. Systemic pesticides, as we know, neonics are. It doesn't take a PhD to figure out if you're lugging home nectar and pollen and feed it to your babies, there's a much higher potential for damage than just out and out kill. There's other thing that you need to think about is the summer a working bee, when we're farming, probably lives 3-4 weeks, maybe a little longer sometimes. But as we get towards winter, they're 4 or 5 weeks, so the effects of the chemical, whatever they absorb, is going to be different in the bee. Mitigation for whether it's farm chemicals or mosquito spraying, moving beehives is not an option, really, practical option. If you ever tried lifting most of the time when we're worried about like triple-A spraying and all of that kind of stuff, my beehives are probably over 100 pounds a piece, let alone where do you go to move them? Probably someplace that's worse in terms of pesticide or whatever. Anyway, that seems to be a problem. So the other thing is, I haven't heard from any, whether it's farmers, beekeepers, the establishment, anybody, have we asked for R&D on newer pesticides? What's the alternative? I got a whole list of alternative pesticides that hugely expensive and maybe more or less of a problem. We've had harsh chemicals before, but where's the collective pressure to pesticide developers come up with a little something better than what neonics, 94% of the world using them? Gotta have an impact.
Anita Dealey.
No comment.
Is there anybody else in the room who might not have signed in who'd like to speak? Yes, what's your name, please?
My name is Alexandra Barch. I'm a beekeeper from Middlesex County. I've been keeping bees since 1978. And in the 80s, I worked as an apiary inspector for MDAR. Middlesex County has commented before this was written, and we'll be submitting a written comment to the Middlesex County Beekeepers Association later. But in the meantime, I have a couple of brief comments. One is that in the beekeeping world, it's recognized that the decline of beekeeping populations is due to pesticides, lack of forage, varroa mites, and other mites, and disease. Those 4 factors. I don't think anyone in the beekeeping world has said that neonicotinoids and pesticides are not a factor. So I don't know whether there's a scientific argument going on within MDAR on this document, but it certainly is a factor and should be included. And the pesticide applications, I live in Lexington, and I've watched suburban people spraying pesticides on blooming trees while they're blooming. So I'm not sure whether this is a legal issue or something that could be included in the plan, but there's a problem with pesticides being sprayed in a way that does kill bees. I've also commented before this document was written about local regulation, which is increasing in the state. That is, I got a call from the town of Natick wondering whether they should require beekeepers to take a beekeeping course. And you may be familiar with the issue in Cambridge where the inspectors said that bees are not allowed in the city of Cambridge. There's some other towns in Massachusetts where bees have been outlawed. You have the opportunity with a pollinator plan that should be designed to increase the ability for people to keep pollinators and have them thrive, to address that. It was addressed in some of the earlier comments, but it was omitted in the draft that came out recently, and that should be put back in. And finally, there's nothing in this plan, or there could be more, to increase forage, which is a big problem. It's been commented on here today for not only the honeybees, but as it's been commented, there isn't much in this plan that addresses the other pollinators. I consider myself a friend of Kim Skirm, who studies bumblebees, and all of the other pollinators, butterflies, and other insects need the forage as well. So this plan needs to do more to address the state opportunities for forage, and I know that there's many, and they've been mentioned in the White House plan that came out in May, but not included in the Massachusetts plan. Thank you.
Alexandra, could you spell your last name for me, please?
It's Bartsch, B-A-R-T-S-C-H.
Thank you. Anyone else who hasn't spoken yet would like to speak? Okay. We've moved quite well through the group. It's just a little bit before 3. If anyone would like to make some further comments, and again, we'll ask you to keep them brief. We'd ask you not to be repetitive of things. Certainly you can indicate your support of what another speaker said, but I request that you not necessarily review the entire line of thinking. And I would also ask you, if at all possible, some of you have done it, some of you have not, to address qualities or deficiencies that you find in the draft plan. Anyone have anything else to say? Yes, Liz.
I failed to mention that I've been a beekeeper for over 15 years now, and I too have seen the effects of neonicotinoids on bees. I was, up until about 2006, 2008 period, I had about 10-15% losses during winter into the spring. I'm now getting 90 to 100% losses. As of 3 weeks ago, checking the hives, I had 50% losses. So I'm seeing that trend where the bees falter when they're coming out of the winter, because now they're going through their pollen and their nectar, which is laced with what was collected earlier in the season. Now, as a previous speaker had mentioned, it would probably be best if both beekeepers and farmers were brought together to the table so that we can understand what each other needs. I don't expect a farmer to know what a beekeeper needs or what bees know, unless he's a beekeeper as well. There have been thousands of studies coming out in the last 6 months showing what perils the neonicotinoids are bringing to beekeeping now. But to assume on the part of someone who does not keep bees, what is best for bees is very counterproductive. And we should all come to the table. We're willing to help in any way to make this a working, productive document.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that there's something going on in Australia that we don't understand that allows neonics to be used. I'm wondering why we don't try and go through our universities here to do a little bit of research and to find out what is the difference. Why is it able to be done south of the equator and not north of the equator? What is the difference? You know, I mean, we all know we need the bees. We're trying to figure out a way to coexist. We have a phenomenon that we don't understand, and nobody's talking about, let's look and see why. I mean, it could be the genetics of the bee itself. Who knows? I don't know. But to sit here and blame one thing or another is not going to fix anything. We're going to replace one chemical with another chemical, and we're still going to have a problem. We need to find out why is there a difference.
Well, just in response to your earlier response to what I said, since I was one of the first to speak and probably said, things that other people would have said anyhow. I just want to say that if I gave you the impression that I or a lot of us were focused on neonics or pesticides in general as a quick blame for what's killing our bees, that's not the case. Believe me, we understand. We're dedicated to education of beekeepers. We understand that there are mites and there are viruses and there are, winter nutrition, getting bees through winter just because they run out of food. Planting forage, that's one of the things that I'm sort of devoted. My wife and I have kind of become an obsession about planting. And we do talks everywhere we can to get people to plant more forage, and to identify which plants are most beneficial to bees and that provide, the most nectar and pollen to the bees. And also, to have honey. I mean, honey is great. Everybody likes honey. Everybody likes local honey. So people want to produce honey, not necessarily just to make money, but just because it's a nice natural resource, to spread around. And we understand that that there's a bee health issue, a general bee health issue. But we also understand, based on research and based on experience that people in this room have had, that there is an effect that pesticides have on bees. And I only mentioned that I felt that the draft of this framework was deficient in not mentioning neonics. I'm sort of focused on pesticides in general. I mean, we do some small scale organic, farming at my place. I don't have a lot of land, but I have no grass. Luckily, I live in a town that doesn't care if people have a front lawn or not, because I don't. I have fruits and vegetables and flowers growing in my front lawn, side, back, everywhere. And there's no chemicals that are applied to anything that's grown in my yard. And anything that we don't grow, we supplement with things that we buy from organic farms, that sell in the local farmers markets, so that I know that stuff can be grown without the use of chemicals. So if I made it sound like I was focused on neonics only as a quick fix, whatever, I'm not. I'm against the use of pesticides in general, and I think that, and I certainly wasn't asking you to abandon the use of neonics in favor of things that are even worse. Believe me. So that's all I wanted. I hope I didn't give that impression. Bee health is a big concern. It's a big concern of the clubs. Education is a big concern of the clubs, and I think that there needs to be more communication between farmers and beekeepers, and I think that if some of the chemicals really aren't so bad, you wouldn't be so worried about having a registry. And maybe there's some public education needed too, but if we can register our hives, you can register your chemical site. I think that's very important.
What's the procedure for where you're going to establish these future meetings so we can be prepared and get our membership?
Well, we will.
Will it be on the website?
We'll put it. We will do an e-blast through our farm and market report. So if any, we encourage you all always to be subscribers to the department's farm and market report. We will do an e-blast there. We will post it on the apiary website. We will likely send out the message to the same original group, and we'll add in whoever emails that we have on these documents today. We'll put it out on a very limitedly subscribed Twitter feed. I'm trying to think, that's pretty much, have I skipped anything?
I usually send it out to the county groups.
We'll send it out to the county groups.
In an email blast, yeah.
I mean, honestly, if we're going to schedule them and come out to them, we'd like people to show up and tell us what they think. That's how we'll handle it. Yes?
I just wanted to say, as a grower of a crop that is definitely dependent on cranberries for our crop production, we're very interested in making sure that the health of our bees is as good as possible. But that being said, every year we bring in about 2,000 honeybee hives from 3 different migratory beekeepers. We've been having them come onto our property for decades now, and I haven't heard any problems from our migratory beekeepers having any problem with colony collapse disorder, and we had record crops last year. So I'm quite interested in getting to the bottom of the situation, trying to figure out how best to make sure that all of the bees are taken care of, but I'm questioning what the problems are.
I didn't say before, but I'm not a commercial beekeeper in Massachusetts. We do pollination for apples and cranberries. We have not had a bad CCD event, as you can call it. We didn't lose 90% of our bees yet. That being said, we do on a year-to-year basis with our commercial or with our migratory bees. It's normal for us to lose 60 to 50-60% is a normal loss for migratory bees. We've learned to deal with that. It's gotten worse, and it's cost more money, more inputs. We've done a lot more research on it. I wouldn't say, however, that it's just pesticides. You had stated what's the difference between here and Australia? Australia doesn't have Varroa. There you go. But we've had Varroa and not had these neonicotinoids and been better than we are now. It's a combination.
Correct.
That's right. And this again, I work with these growers. It's a partnership. All this in here, we're all in it together. We have to remember that this is a partnership. Everybody has to work together with each other. You've got farmers that are big landowners, and we as commercial beekeepers, we work with farmers all the time. We have, down in Louisiana, we have 250 bee yards. They are not on our land. It's normal practice for us to go out, and New York State as well, it's the same deal. We're on other people's land, quote unquote rented, usually it's through some sort of thing, but anyways, and it's a partnership. People have to work with the neighbors. If someone wants to keep bees next to a commercial farm, they're going to need to talk to that farmer. And that would be the best way, is to talk to them and have a relationship with them. Same thing goes with these, one of our biggest concerns being in Massachusetts, and for some of the small guys, is the increased use of suburban pesticide usage. And I actually contacted TAR last year for somebody that sprayed my yard, and not my yard, my neighbor's yard, and he was claiming it was organic. The water part of the spray was organic. The pesticide part wasn't. But these are the problems that we have, is miscommunication by applicators possibly, and other people. There's a lot of people in here that do care, and those are the people that we want to help build this plan. And then hopefully we can get them to help educate the people that are not paying enough attention to it.
Thank you.
Could you explain that Just because, for reference point, that's really what I think is important, is if you explain the water versus, it was a talking point that escaped me, but I'm not a beekeeper or an agriculture. You know, I'll represent the non-pesticide industry.
Well, it was somewhat of a ha-ha, because he was claiming it was organic, but it's not organic if it's got a chemical in it. Just because it has water in it doesn't mean it's 95% organic. You're using a commercial or non-organic pesticide. It's not an organic spray. So that's.
Yeah, one thing I've been wondering about is the water supply too. Like I live in Concord, and I used to have 4 hives, and I actually dealt with a lot of varroa mite before 2012 when I finally stopped. But my bees used to regularly go down to the Sudbury River to collect water off lily pads in hot weather. And upstream from us is Nashotah Golf Course, which is keeping bees. Actually, I'm curious if it's the one we're talking about. He uses neonics. When I called him up in 2012 just asking him if he used them, he said, "Yeah, we do use them." And I didn't say, "I'm not going to ask you to stop. I just want to know if it's there," because the collapses that I was seeing were described in that first paper that came out from the Harvard School of Public Health. And when I read that, the in situ paper, I don't know, probably a lot of you guys have seen that. In situ replication of colony collapse disorder by minute amounts of neonicotinoids being in the diet of the bees. And one threshold there was 20 parts per billion. So I took a look at, there's a product called Merit, which contains imidacloprid. And if you follow the directions on the Merit package for turf, you apply enough active ingredient per acre, well, per square foot, whatever, that it takes 4 years of rainwater, assuming no evaporation, to get it down to 20 parts per billion. And so I'm thinking the Nashotah Golf Course is upstream of my hives, and who knows what other golf courses are upstream of that, and homeowners buying stuff from Ace Hardware, you name it. So that I really think that we ought to do a test of the groundwater flowing that bees are accessing to. It's probably, it wouldn't be that expensive. I think they're about $400 a test. A few tests of some of the slower flowing rivers or standing water might be very useful to get a handle on how this stuff might be moving around. And it seems to me that it would be very good to register, to require hardware stores that sell material containing active ingredients, pesticides, to let us know how much they're selling. I think that's not too hard. So many bags of this, so many bags of that. At least I know it's being released somewhere in the environment. I won't exactly know where, but at least we get a rough idea of the total load. I mean, I think a good question would be how many pounds of various pesticides are dumped on the state of Massachusetts every year by, all the various people that use them, because that might give us an indication of where problems are. Because with bees, at least in the case of bees or any insect, I don't know, I can't speak for all insects, but it's been proven that neonics are very harmful to bumblebees. It's been proven that they harm honeybees in concentrations. So every study, the more neonics a honeybee colony gets, the lower percentage they survive the winter. My experience before about 2010 was typically out of, I'm not a big beekeeper, I'm a hobby beekeeper, but I had 4 hives, and I would rarely lose a hive in the winter, even after the varroa mites came along. And I didn't treat particularly for varroa mites. I just provided mechanical methods for trying to control them rather than using pesticides. So I think, and I'm not familiar with some of these newer viruses that are coming along, but I think that it would be very important to really register where this stuff is being dumped and how much, and even getting a gross number would be helpful.
I just want to make 2 comments. Number 1, communication is crucial to this issue. Communication between MDAR and the beekeepers, MDAR, pesticide people. And I really applaud you for having these meetings. Number 2, information and data. Let the data speak for itself. And I commend MDAR for filling the apiary inspection position and putting him in place here. And I'm impressed that the survey was up this year to give the actual data instead of saying this and that. Let the numbers speak for themselves. And I do think that there's significant literature already out there that the 8 county presidents presented to show on neonicotinoids and pesticides. I think there's a lot of data that's out there, but I look forward to Massachusetts generating its own data with its beekeepers, telling about the losses and so forth. So I commend you for filling that position and taking it seriously.
Yes.
I'd like to,
You didn't speak before, sir, did you?
no,
What's your name?
Cliff Yells.
Sure, what would you like to say? Excuse me.
Well, no problem. I'd just like to, call attention to what's called the Australia distraction. Basically, an argument that's trotted out every time, we have this discussion on neonics. And, the fact is that the conditions in Australia are quite different than they are around here. A lot of beekeeping, that goes on there takes place, I guess, out in the wild or out in the outback, where neonics aren't really used. And I think if you scratch beneath the surface a little, you'd find in the areas where the neonics are used, they are having problems with bees. So I'd advise people to kind of be aware of that and take that into consideration when the Australia argument is trotted out in these discussions.
Okay.
I'd like to second some of the things that we just said about pesticides in water. USGS did some surveys that they've published. You know, they're finding neonics in the Mississippi River. Now, you can detect pesticides in the volumes of water that are going down the Mississippi. You're talking about a lot of pesticides. If there's detectable amounts, you're finding it in the Missouri River. So all the huge rivers in the United States have these materials in them. And I do think that it would be a very positive thing to do to just looking at the waters in Massachusetts. It would be very useful, very interesting thing to happen. Estimates are that something like 5% of the neonics that are put on corn seed actually goes into the corn plant. 95%, according to measurements that have been published, are actually left in the soil and they're very water soluble. They go in the groundwater and find their way to creeks and runoff someplace. And of course, bees get exposed to that. Finally, I'd just like to say, and again, I think the openness of having these meetings is very useful. I do think that MDAR is in a kind of a unique place right now and has an opportunity to do something in this plan that would be very, very positive and progressive for both the ag industry and for the environmental work by putting together a pollinator protection plan that really is useful and reasonable. I'm not suggesting outlawing things, but reasonable oversight on the use of these materials. It would be a tremendous step forward, and I think probably a national model. And I think you have, John, I think you have the chance to do that. But right now, the plan has really no mention of pesticides in it. And, you know, that really is a huge, well, it's cursory mention of pesticides in it. There's no real, nothing in there that's going to be meaningful. And given the fact that we all know that varroa and viruses are a big problem with bees, but remember, that's almost all just honeybees, not other pollinators. But still, they are major problems for honeybees, and absolutely no question about it. Probably the most important problem. But there's very little this group can do about that other than the people that manage their bees. But what government can do is you can do something about the pesticides. Right? There's really no control. I can walk into Ace Hardware and buy bags of stuff and throw it in my lawn, and the groundwater off my irrigation system goes to my neighbors, goes to the local creeks. Affects everybody. And there's no control over that. The fact that the bag I buy says this is how much to use, who knows I use that much? I mean, if a little's good, a lot more is better. That's the average, you know, that's what most people do. If I have a lawn, somebody will piece my lawn up, he's going to use neonics just in case I get jack beetle.
Not necessarily.
Well,
Our members, some use neonics, some don't use neonics. So it's not necessarily thing. I have a question for you. I didn't get your name.
Good comment.
So if we were going to put together a study to collect data, there are a lot of different components bees' health. How would you isolate each of those so that you could make a determination? You just said that varroa mites was probably the largest, and I think there's, from what I've heard, that seems to be generally accurate, or at least that seems to what people think. So Dr. Liu's report was discarded by everybody as not being really accurate, so that's been thrown away. So how would you determine, say, something, how much of a percentage might be neonates, how much might be somebody who was spraying a tree when they weren't supposed to be, how much would be varroa mite, how much would be lack of foraging, or any of the others?
First of all, Dr. Liu's report, which I was part of, was quoted by the whole European Union and Ontario when they went in controls and put in controls on the use of neonates. It's been cited like 300 or 400 times in other scientific journals. So it's been discarded by the industry. The industry didn't like that report at all.
I've heard a lot of peer review.
But if peer review, but let's not get into that. The fact is that cigarettes, cause cancer, and it's pretty well accepted, correct? There are a lot of other things that cause cancer too. And the cigarette industry were using the very same arguments that the manufacturers of pesticides are using, fought the use of any kind of controls on cigarettes for years and years, simply for the same reasons. And they use the same tactics. Anybody who really wrote articles against cigarettes in the 70s and 80s, you were, and I was part of that. You get your name just on the equivalent of the internet. It's just argumentum ad hominem. It's the first thing to do. All right, and then you defund anybody who's doing research. I was talking to a woman last Saturday from Texas A&M. She's not going to do research on neonics because she will never get EPA or USDA funding. The industry makes sure she won't. She can't get tenure without funding. Therefore, she doesn't do the work. It's just a systematic use of that, and that needs to stop. I mean, it needs to be understood by people that that's what's going on.
So
and MDAR needs to take understand that.
How would you design studies in order to determine what the percentages of each of those various items that are known to be affecting the health of bees?
You would have to, first of all, doing a definitive study would be very hard. No one has ever done a definitive study isolating cigarettes from all the other causes of cancer. No one's ever done that. No one will ever do that because it's an impossible. So your industry point of view is until you can prove that we are causing, we are the ones causing 10% of this problem, don't give us any controls. That's illogical.
I'm not, you're assuming.
Okay, folks, I think let's get back to the
That was my
broader issue.
Thank you.
John, we're here to talk about bee health and how can we improve on bee health, okay? And all of this stuff, I mean, we can all cite studies that say one thing, we can all cite studies that say something else. I mean, they're out there, they're numerous. I mean, but it's bee health we have to focus on in all pieces of it. And the mites are as much a concern as the neonics. The viruses are the same. Everything is a concern. It all comes together and it all adds to the problem. Neonics is only one little piece of what we think might be a problem. We know that the mites are a problem. We know that the viruses are a problem. And we need to be doing whatever we can to find out how much, what is the biggest problem? All right, so we need to be studying bee health, period. All pieces of it. And we need to be working towards doing a better job. We need the beekeepers to do a better job controlling the mites, controlling the diseases. We have to do a better job with insecticides in our applications and paying attention to making sure that we take care of the bees as much as we can. But if we're gonna get through this, we're gonna have to do this all together. We have to identify the stuff. Some of the problem is their problem. Some of the problem is our problem. And that's what the plan is for. The plan is for how do we achieve better bee health.
Well, actually, the words on the plan are pollinator protection.
Well, okay, pollinator, think of
You know, we understand, like I said, you know, we don't wanna repeat what we've been saying, right? But we understand about bee health and about mites and viruses and everything else. There's a lot of, information that might indicate that damage done by pesticides makes the bees less resistant to the other pathogens that are present in their hives there. And how are you gonna prove that? I don't know, but if we would do away with, you know, if we could do away with mites, if we could write a document that says varroa mites are not allowed in your apiaries, that would be nice, but we can't. But if we could limit the use of the pesticides and possibly increase the overall health of the bees, they could do a better job with fighting off the viruses, and so there's some things that are within your control and some things that aren't.
And exactly what I'm saying.
And believe me, we are doing everything we can to fight the mites.
Enlighten me just one little bit.
Well,
And
we're not.
to educate and to find new materials.
How do you control the viola?
Okay, we're not, this is not a forum, this is not a debate.
Okay, John, I
And we know, no need to apologize, everyone's been very respectful, we appreciate that. There are some differing points of view that I think we all agree we're not going to solve today. The department wants to hear what you have to say. Barbara, did you, I'm sorry, did you want to say something in the back? No. You had your hand up for a while there, yes.
Well, I guess I'm gonna have to coin a new phrase here, the varroa mite distraction. Okay, there is a, sort of, that's another argument where, the, agricultural and pharmaceutical industry sort of want to blame all the bee health problems on the varroa mites and the viruses, which are actually vectored, a lot of them are vectored by the mite. The fact is that they're weakened by the pesticides and have less resistance to the mite. And the other thing is, there's another distraction where they want to blame the beekeeper for not controlling the varroa mite adequately. Well, in the state of Massachusetts, we lack two of the tools that would allow us to do so. One of them's in the process of being corrected, and the other one I'm not sure about, but we're talking about hop guide and oxalic acid here. So maybe we'll see what happens when those deficiencies get corrected, maybe not. That's my comment.
I've kept hives on other people's properties. I'm not a major commercial beekeeper like the Cards. I don't move my hives, they stay where they are. And I've done this now for quite a few years. I've kept a colony alive for quite a few years without it crashing. I didn't have problems with managing varroa mites. If you know how to do that, your hives will thrive. And I had no problem with that. So I want to dispel the myth that it's just the varroa mites. It's not just the varroa mites. What happens is the varroa mites do their damage, but then you have pesticides coming in that don't allow the bee to recover from the damage done. So we need help with that. We can't do that, but you can. You can help us with the pesticides. Somehow we have to find a common ground, and we have to come to a table and understand what our agricultural community needs to know from the beekeepers, because they can't know everything about bees, and what we need to know about the agricultural community. If we could gain a better understanding of each other, I think we have a basis to go forward.
Yeah. Could I add a comment? But at the end of the report, there's an appendix on performance metrics, which I thought was quite interesting. And I liked the 4 basic topics, but I wondered if you could maybe, it wasn't very particular on what performance metrics, the ones I was looking for, I'll put it that way. First, for example, when there's an application, a registry for pesticide applications that would include location, date, amount of, as I said in my testimony. And the same, so you already got that. But skipping ahead to bee, when a bee hive dies, when there's a bee killed, I think it would be very good if someone in the state were collecting the date, and a description of how many bees were on the bottom board, so we can tell it from a normal collapse versus a colony collapse, where the bees didn't return to the hive. And the location of the hive would be very important to know. And collecting that data over time will help us, I think, beekeepers and farmers work better together, and landscapers and golf courses, et cetera.
Mr. Gentleman from Makepeace.
I do strongly encourage greater research because, as I said, we bring in 2,000 hives per year. Our bogs are surrounded by commercial and residential properties. Use the same 3 beekeepers year after year for decades, and they're not reporting any significant problems with colony collapse disorder. So I am very interested to know what the situation might be.
Would you be willing to share, sir, would you be willing to share the names of those hive operators or the beekeepers so we can check with them in terms of what their losses are per year? If the migratory beekeepers with 50% losses, if that's typical, as a beekeeper before 2010 or 2011 when my bees really started to succumb, my losses per year were typically 16%. Averaged over, a 20-year period. But I was dealing with varroa mite just fine. In my case, I found keeping the hives in a sunny location in the winter really helped with varroa, and a screen bottom board helped with varroa. And even though our bee inspector didn't like it, I was using a comb called ANP, which I don't know whether it helped or not, but it didn't seem to hurt.
I think we're.
One quick thing here, John. There's been a little bit of talk here about being notified, okay, about when we would, like say my farm, I decide to put a spray out and I have to notify somebody. Let me give you a little idea of how that happens. I'll go out in the evening, 7, 8 o'clock, in the summer, do some scouting, look, find the problem, and by 4 a.m. I'm spraying. Who do I call at 4 a.m.? Who do I call at midnight to tell them I'm doing that? I mean, that's realism. That's how we do it.
But I guess, can I respond to that? Sure. Well, anyway, I don't care when you do it. Just knowing that you might do it is all I need to know. Now I can plan it. I know you're gonna do it at some point, right?
Yeah, but that's
I can't tell the bees stay home.
But that's every acre of every farm.
I know that. I understand.
Yeah, but you use X material.
Yeah.
With certain time of the year.
Yeah.
I mean, I think date, time isn't that important.
That is impossible, because I don't even know what I'm planting where.
Well,
That's by availability of the ground, which dries out first.
But you're gonna plant some, say, corn and some squash, I don't know, for 2 examples. You grow corn and squash.
Yes.
Okay. So you rotate the crops. Every year you're gonna put corn in different places. But it's probably not that far from where it was last year, unless some farms are pretty widely distributed.
What you're asking for is impossible.
No, I disagree. I think that.
That's because I don't agree with some of what you're saying on bees because I don't understand them. You disagree because you don't understand what we do.
I garden too. I don't have.
You don't garden for a living?
No, well, I feed myself. But the point is this, is that if you know, if you're growing a patch of corn and you're gonna plant treated seed, for example, you know that well ahead of time. If you've got a patch of corn and you're looking for corn earworm, and you know you gotta hit them because you know the conditions are right. At least according to my friends, that's what happened. Then there's no way you can tell me ahead of time, but you can tell me ahead of time there's the possibility that I will apply this pesticide to this crop at this rate. And you can even tell me there's a 25% or a 95% probability. That's all I want to know. Because then I can plan ahead where I'm going to locate my hives. My hives are going to move around in response to the year. I'm not going to say, oh, you can find them today, and we'll truck them off to Sudbury or something, right?
If you're using sweet corn as an example,
yeah.
I mean, we plant treated seed, no question about that.
Right.
Okay, but when corn gets ready to be harvested, depending on the degree days and the stage of growth of the corn and where you are, you're going to be spraying 4 to 5 times on that piece of ground with something.
Yeah.
Okay, now we shake it around, we do this. I don't know what I'm going to use this year. It all depends what's working. I may not know that until the morning I put it out.
Well, it may be. I'm not going into too much detail. The only risk I would see once your corn is tasseled for bees would be if the bees were collecting water off your corn.
They're always when always dazzled.
Okay, folks, I think, I think that it's wonderful that, as we've heard, the need for different constituencies to understand a little bit more about the priorities and the practices of others, and I'm happy that some of that is going on this afternoon. But the main purpose we're here is to talk about the pollinator protection plan. So last call. Something about the plan.
Can you help facilitate more of this conversation so that we can make a better plan?
Well, first of all, I think we have in the plan, and we don't consider the plan is going to be a living document. I mean, we will come out with a final draft in the near future. That doesn't mean that that plan is going to be chiseled in stone. So could the department, with resources, do what you like? I'd like to think we can. I'd like to take that back and talk to a few folks about how we actually might accomplish such a task. But I certainly wouldn't rule it out. I think, obviously, education, understanding, taking a walk in somebody else's shoes, and also agreeing on science are very important factors to finding the best solutions. So, again, any final comments about the plan, Dick?
Yeah, one of the things, I would encourage you to coordinate with other commissioners about how to use some of their resources to get forage away from agricultural land, which we believe, I believe, the vast majority of agricultural land, you plant forage on there and you're simply attracting bees to something that's already got neonics in it, because that's widely used. I happened to talk with George Peterson when I was here last Friday. He didn't know anything about the pollinator protection plan. He's the commissioner of this building. You know that, John. There are other people, I'm sure, within the administration you could coordinate with. Peterson said that Mr. Peterson said that Commissioner Peterson said that they have a program where wildlife is going around and rotating land use within the wildlife domain, so that there's varieties of wildlife habitat, which means they cut things down and then let them regrow. A lot of that in that process, in that succession process, is tremendous amount of land that's going to be available to put in milkweed and all kinds of things that would be great for pollinators, and it'll be in land that's untreated. And I think that would be an excellent thing to get.
I will confess that I made a note to myself to discuss with some others on what possibilities might exist for expansion of forage on state land, and we'll have to take a look at that. I want to thank you all for coming today. We really do appreciate your time and your input. We strongly urge you to make written comments. I admit that in some ways receiving written comments, it's easier for us to physically manage them from a time perspective. If we receive things in Word documents, that can be very helpful. I'd also ask you, certainly to make overall comments about the plan, but also to make very specific comments. If on page 6, paragraph 2, you think that's a wonderful paragraph, I hope, or if you may not feel that that paragraph is well worded, I'd like you to really call that out. That would allow us, sometimes it's hard to take generalities and really analyze them and try to relate them to particular points in the document. So if you could do that, I think it would be helpful. I certainly can't promise that the document that we finally release is going to be, I hope it's at least satisfactory, but I don't know if it's going to be the document that you dream of. But we're trying to make our best effort to find our way through this process, and with your help, we're going to do the best job we can. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
And before you go.
Oh, yeah.